Curious to hear his presentation. Well, thank you very much, Aris. Well, this is really the area that I spent half a life in. I say it's 50 years of professional experience. It's a lifelong struggle against pedo crime, really. Now, what does it look like in reality? Every year we celebrate the 20th September as World's Children Days, and a few days, a Heart for Children event was held where 25 million euro were collected in donations. And if you realize that some of these people there earn 20,000 euro a month and they donated 500 euro, you can see how bigoted they are. So the 25th of May is the day of missing children, and another important day, and neglect of children. That's where it starts. When a society doesn't appreciate children anymore, when parents don't look after the welfare of their children anymore, then something is foul in this state. The way a society deals with its weakest members says everything about the quality of the state. If psychological and physical mistreatment is added, if children are beaten, kicked, and abused sexually, if all of this goes into child trafficking with sex scandals and murderous rituals, then this is really worse than everything. Child neglect is one of the most frequent and oftentimes unprosecuted crimes. No child will file a report with the police if love is withheld from it, if care and nutrition aren't taken care of. All of this will have consequences, very important long-term consequences. We know that from investigations made after COVID. These children will be traumatized for life if they have health problems, then this will have an impact for the rest of their lives. And where child neglect flips into child abuse, I keep collecting cuttings, and the stacks of clippings are just rising, and my wife is constantly complaining about all these clippings. If you look into a child abuse, child's rape, etc., then the stack just keeps growing. A child from Austria was held by the mother in this cat box for months, and the mother was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And it was beaten so that it could only survive with all these tubes going in and out of its body. And those are the children, the cases that you see on, and then you see these children, and they're died from sudden infant death. Then you don't know whether the parents abused the child or if they just died. And those are terrible experiences that nobody should have. And this child abuse leads to an entirely damaged generation. We know the study that was just published, the consequences of the COVID measures are ongoing. A whopping 73% of children are psychologically damaged from the 3 years of COVID only. And we have knowledge and findings that have a much worse impact. Autism has become a huge problem in schools, which is also based on this. And autism is something that we at MWFPG will turn into Symposium next year. We want to take a look at the long-term consequences, long-term damage caused to children by abuse. Now, missing children, I mentioned it, back in 22, The FBI complained about 359,000 missing children, and I think Donald Trump made a press release the other day speaking of 380 or 390,000 missing children in the US. And we don't need to look at the US. The German Federal Bureau of Investigation also reported thousands of missing children. Many of them just run away, come back a few days, but 1,800 missing or dead children are missing, are on the list, and they're usually not searched for much. One example is this child, little Ariane, who was searched for days and was found by a person walking in the woods. In the EU, we have 51,433 cases of missing children, and journalist was estimates a number of 792 missing children in Germany. So how come so few children are officially registered when journalists report so many? And there's no single central register, neither for Germany nor for the EU. Missing children are used not only as sex slaves, but also as work slaves. ILO, the International Labor Organization, estimates that 5.5 million children worldwide are turned into work slaves. Terre des Hommes has similar figures. Take the example of enslaved children in the Congo, the beautiful example, beautiful in inverted commas. If you drive an electric vehicle, then you know that you're part of this crime chain. The children who work in the cobalt mines are working in the mines because the cobalt is needed for the batteries for e-vehicles. And if you look at the sexually abused children, we're only looking at the tip of the iceberg. 75% of cases happen within or near the family. The uncle, father, the mother as well. Women are also perpetrators. 82% of cases have the involvement of parents or family, so they either get involved directly or look on, so engage in voyeurism. Only 1% is becoming publicly known. So in every school class, there are 1 to 2 children who have been sexually abused. This has to be pointed out. I think it's really important that this is spoken about. What I haven't included in the PowerPoint presentation now is 1% of cases that are reported, they lead to investigation, go to the public prosecutor and to a sentence, and it's estimated, no studies have been performed there. An estimate is that fewer than 10% of the cases that have been reported to the police will lead to a court sentence. So it's diminutive, the number of cases that are actually penalized. The last study that I could find dealing with this, how many of the sexual abusers have been sentenced, is 10 years old. So what's happening in the meantime? So that's a scandal in its own right. So let's go back to the picture in the center here. That's this little girl. That's a doll by Terre des Hommes. When they found this on the internet, when this was published, this doll, 20,000 buyers ordered it within a few hours. And you can go online again, you can still find it. And this is being bought like crazy. And there's a study that in every second, 750,000 pedo criminals look for sexual toys online every second. One example, Teichtmeister, an Austrian actor, very well known, participated in the Sissy movies. Everybody adored him until it turned out that he had collated 76,000 files, which he commented, and he did that between 2008 and 2021. But also dependent on cocaine, and his drug dependency wasn't criminally prosecuted. He was sentenced to 2 years on parole for this crime. And every single picture is a victim, is a child. Every picture represents one child who will suffer for the rest of his or her life from this trauma. So a 2-year sentence on parole is way too low, I believe. Marc Dutroux, one of the huge cases that people remember, these 11 children, young people from 11 to 19 years that were sexually abused, 2 children that were murdered, 2 children who died of hunger, of starvation, in the prison that he built. He was sentenced for life, as were co-perps, but the co-perps have been released by now. The demon of Belgium is still in prison, but it's interesting if you look into how investigations have been interfered with. I think 27 witnesses died under curious circumstances, accidents, hit by lightning, etc. The investigators were replaced, and the case suddenly was dismembered. And at the end, only Marc Dutroux was sentenced, but in the background, a lot of other people were involved. So this man built up a sex organization that went to the pinnacle of politics. We have a similar event in the UK. Pedo scandal with 76 politicians, 43 artists, and 35 journalists. 100,000 children were involved in this business. Now, if you dig into this 5-6 years on, you can't find anything about it. You can't find anything. The victims are gone. The criminal complaints are gone. It's amazing how fast this happened. Jeffrey Epstein, what an example. I don't know how many of you read the press reports 1 through 4. If you read it, and I indicated it as a source here, I recommend you look at press release 1 to 4. The report is Jeffrey Epstein scandal too big to fail, and that's really the background about this mega group. He was a Mossad agent. There's this Maywell lady who's in jail as well. The Lolita Express, that's known by now. And then the links to FBI President Louis Freeh, Bill Clinton, or the link to former FBI President J. Edgar Hoover, who dressed up as a woman in front of school classes, all the things that have been uncovered and then covered up again. This little black book by Jeff Epstein hasn't turned up yet. I hope and I pray that Donald Trump though he's been involved, that he will follow up on his promise that he gave to a journalist a few days ago, that he will open up the Jeffrey files. He also wants to open the unknown or the secret JFK files, and he wants to open up the files on 9/11. I'm curious to see what happens. So can you. When these files are disclosed, then we will learn a lot of things we wouldn't dream of. Jeffrey Epstein, that goes back to around Contra. People were involved. It's incredible. This sexual blackmail was nowhere more obvious than with this fellow, rapper mogul Sean Combs, aka P. Diddy. A few weeks ago, the investigative authorities searched his villas. He had, of course, several mansions, and they all housed cameras and sound recording equipment. That's what it's all about. It's about blackmailing, about ransom, about power. The sex is only a means to an end. That's only sweet that the rich, the beautiful, the important, the very important persons are lured into situations, compromising situations that are filmed and recorded so they can be blackmailed. So that's the way it happens. This includes names. It makes you dizzy, from Prince Harris to J.C. DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, producers, authors, 247 victims, 135 witnesses, 172 co-perpetrators. If this is made public, it's still all under wraps. Then I expect the earth to quake. It's also quaking in Disneyland. Walt Disney, someone who we all love and cherish, he built an empire. Over 137 arrests by now within this empire, all people who were active in the field of sexual abuse of children. Everything hushed up, nearly as bad as with the church. Again, an Instagram priest who has thousands of child porn pictures, and he's still allowed to preach. But if he runs for the right-wing German AfD, he is kicked out immediately. I recommend you watch this movie, Sound of Freedom, an excellent movie that speaks about child trafficking, or the French film Les Survivantes. It's a movie that is currently being shown in Luxembourg, France, Belgium, Switzerland, Canada. It is about pedophilia of the worst kind, but it's all hushed up. It's all covered up. We wouldn't know much in Germany if there wasn't the US institution NECMEC, the National Institute for the monitoring of abuse of children. They have reported 312 million pictures of child abuse since 2002 to 2020. They have reported 15,520 cases to the German authorities in 22, and increasing numbers of 5, 6, 7% every year. And it doesn't matter who's Minister of the Interior, Nancy Faeser, or whoever, when they say, oh, this terrible development, we urgently need to do something. We have to bring the full weight of the law to bear on these people. I can't listen to it anymore because it's the same thing year after year after year. No matter what they present, the crime statistic, that's only a small fraction of what actually helps. What we see is only the report on how successful the police were, and there's no stats on how things are handled. Once a case is reported to the police, is investigated, then prosecuted by the public prosecutor, and then the public prosecutor uses so many options to discontinue any prosecutions. There's a whole host of different paragraphs that justify that. Then we have this workload. So if they have 40 cases, at a time and discontinues them, then he has handled 40 cases. Even if he closes them, they've done their share. So, is there any follow-up on how many cases go from reporting, being reported to the police to the sentences? I could really swamp you with stats, and it's really true that the big cases that became known in Germany, Lütke 2018, Bergisch Gladbach, many know about this. Most know this 2019 or Münster 2020. These figures go on. If you look at 2018 at this case, this Lütke case, it's so shocking. If you look into it in depth and you look at the fact that what the committee of inquiry in Parliament unearthed in 2024, then all of those, then we have to say that all of those who should protect the children, they all failed, be it the police, the public prosecutor. We have this cheap campsite, very dirty, incredibly dirty, and a child is handed over by the child welfare authorities to a foster parent who lives in this filth, and they say, okay, we can accept this child being educated and raised there. It was abused there multiple times, very severely, and no child welfare authority did anything about it. And you can find thousands of pages on the internet, thousands of child destinies, fates that are simply wiped away. There are 40 million photos daily on Instagram, 13 million on videos on TikTok. It's all available, and you can look at it all, and it's of course tempting. If this child abuse, sexual abuse material is collated and sent to the member states of NICMEC, this is only a fraction of the actual cases, even though they report them to us, and some of them aren't even crimes, as it turns out, at the end of the day, but the vast majority are crimes, and most of it is to be found on Facebook, on Instagram, or WhatsApp. So and there's Rumpel and God knows what. It's easy to spread these things now. So we're only at the end of this chain. We have to say, LinkedIn, there's 4.7 million in the Philippines, sorry, in India, 4.7 million, Philippines, 3.2 million, Pakistan, 7 million, US, 725,000, and Germany, 78,000 cases. So we're doing fairly well with a relatively low number, but we're getting more and more reports year after year after year. In 2021, it was 78,000. In 22, it was 136,000. In 2023, it was 180,000. And many crimes are committed by young adults. It's very tempting to make a picture, sex photos, wanted or unwanted, and then seconds later they're uploaded. It's just horrible. As I said, I can't really watch the press conferences anymore. I printed it out. After all, Germany continues to be one of the safest countries in the world, but that certainly doesn't apply to the children who have been sexually abused and who are neglected, who experience violence. Violent crime has increased by 8.6%. It's like a maths course. We only hear percentages, they're added up, and next year it's unbearable how this is statistically butchered. And when you say integration is limiting it's reaching its limits, that is something that warrant your being a criminal nearly, but we add many cases underage perpetrators are 30%. So underage people who abuse underage people. Something goes wrong in our society. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. The children who are neglected develop negatively, and a negatively developing child will continue to develop in an antisocial way. The situation of sexual abuse shows the increase. We're at 16,000 now. If this big overview, if I read that right, 126,000 crimes against sexual self-determination have been reported to the police. That is the 8th year in a row that we have a new record high. And Article 19 of the UN Convention of the Children's Rights is that they must be protected from sexual abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't find anything less important, more negligible than UN conventions. I know all sorts of conventions, be it Human Rights Convention, Convention on Children's Rights. Look at what happens in court in Germany. Nobody asks about human rights conventions anymore. And there are good guidelines from 2014 to 2011, from the EU 2016, the guidelines that were made about in order to combat child abuse. And I also wrote a study for the European Parliament, writing down what needs to be done in the European sphere. Now, that was for fun, just for fun. I got a fee, and then the paper probably was shelved someplace. The World Health Organization wrote an incredible paper that was published only much later. The standards for sexual education. I have to underscore this because that shows what is the appreciation of children in our society. There are no rules for exemptions for parents who would like to remove their children from schools education. So if the parents are disempowered here, and if the state is no longer a watchdog but is becoming the educator of the children, then what is the objective here? Do they want to split up the core family? Well, one of the first things that I remember when I was first hired was the definition of the term dignity. Dignity is the most important responsibility of the state. So it's the definition of dignity is the respect of the individuality. And I've always remembered this. I think that children have a dignity, they have an individuality. You have to respect it. You don't have to accept it or to abuse it. You have to honor it. So there were standards for sexual education in Europe. So Karl our Minister of Health, a guideline for early child masturbation. And when that was published, everybody spoke about it. That was back in 2011. That was by the German health authority. And when Karl published this, people said, oh, this can't be true, what it says here. If you look at the details of what it says here, 0 to 4 years learning about masturbation, the developing of interests in your own and other people's bodies, 4 to 6 years learning masturbation, encouragement to express your sexual needs. And gentlemen, that is the age where children still believe in Father Christmas and in the Easter here. So I wonder where were all the people working in creches and nurseries? Nobody said anything. Then 6 to 9 years, education about sexuality, online pornography, secret love, and self-stimulation. And then 9 to 12 years, first sexual experience in over 12 years, use of online pornography, use of pornography based on scientific findings. Those are no guidelines that Karl Lauterbach invented. It's a framework concept um, for experts. This is on the market, and the paper is out there. Who were these people? Dr. Kinsley, and we remember everything is allowed. 68, the generation of 68, and all these experiments that were made back then. And all these studies that Mr. Kinsey published, that was just, they weren't valid, that was just child abuse.
I just look at one study, and they actually recruited from subjects from brothels and from the street as the subjects. And they actually produced 26 orgasms in a boy aged 4 over 24 hours. A 4-year child is used as a sexual object. It is actually tortured for 24 hours until it shows any sign of simulation, whether it cried or screamed or whatever it showed any other type of stimulation. Everything was counted as an orgasm. This is supposed to be scientific. This is incredible, unacceptable. Then um, the follower of Kinsey was Professor Kendler. He actually wrote his PhD on sexual education. Scientific experiments were continued by him. His aim was actually to lower the shame barrier. So this was basically a plaidoyer. He advocated for pedophile foster fathers. Um, and he actually introduced a new colloquial language for sexuality, for sexual education, and this made him a professor. Only later, the University of Bielefeld checked it and said, well, this is a pedosexual network across a variety of scientific institutions. Kinsey and Kendler and Uwe Sielert from Kiel, that's another one. Those three have produced the complete scientific basics, the training material for all of the people who sat in the youth welfare offices. And they actually passed on this knowledge. And in the back end, you could see the green, red, woke community, Cohn-Bendit, first and foremost, who in front of cameras confessed how great it was if a child opened his pants and said that sex with the children was justified and should never be actually punished. There were some studies. Tetler Walter was the only person who wrote against it, saying that it was shocking how quickly pedophilia actually entered green policy. This is 8 years ago. And nothing has changed over the past 8 years. Everything stayed the same. Not only the Green Party, but Mrs. Giffey, an ex-doctor, this lady also actually asked for sex boxes for sexual exploration rooms at creches and nurseries. It makes me throw up when I have to talk about it. Then the drag hearings in Bavarian nurseries and in Hesse as well. Um, I would have expected it to happen in Hesse, but in Bavaria, incredible. Then the UN Charter, which actually met on the 5th of April 2024. And they said what normal citizens ask or demand for themselves. A child needs father and mother and Christian upbringing and education and the determination of sex. And UN Charter says that this is a violation, a crime against humanity. Incredible. Megan and who else? General Wolf and Meek, General Wolf and Meek, they spoke. Yeah, can I remember? They said that this was an ideological diversification, that you should criminalize other types of thinking. This was their ideology. And this is exactly what the Greens, the Reds, and the United Nations do. Those thinking normally are criminalized gradually. Reading here, UNICEF said pornography makes kids happier. Hello? And this is scientists who've said this? The children's brains respond completely different than adult brains. The consumption of pornography results in fears and wrong perceptions of sexuality and love. Their ability to maintain relations suffers from this. What are we doing? The broadcast with the mouse, which is his children's series, now also broadcasts LGBTQ propaganda, speaks about genitals and trans agendas. Yeah. Taking custody, and I'm sure that Andrea will talk about this. This is a million euro or dollar business and nothing else, because expert opinions are paid for lots and lots of money, but you will be able to describe this a lot better than I do, this taking charge of somebody. Then the Human Rights Council for Human Rights was shocked at the high number of cases where kids are taken charge of. One of the highest numbers is rated in Germany, so there must be something wrong there. Then the sex self or gender self-determination law in Germany, and last but not least, Mr. Gieseking. He actually filed a petition with 23 signature and demanded that pedosexualists should also be exempted from legal prosecutions. Leave our kids alone. This is my personal request. And let's return to the three golden sets: time, tenderness, and affection. This is what Pestalozzi said. Our kids need no drag queens are needed, no dirt, no filth, no sexual education with dildos or whatever, and stop the WHO. Thank you very much for your attention.